These are woven picots. They're great for semi-detached flower petals, but they can be a little tricky to stitch. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make woven picots and also how to make your woven picots look better. Now to make woven picot, you need a needle and thread, of course, and you need to start with a sharp needle, a needle with a sharp point. So here I'm using a size 5 pearl cotton threaded into a size 22 chenille needle. Then it's really helpful for the weaving part of this stitch to switch to a blunt needle. Here I'm using a size 22 tapestry needle because tapestries have a blunt point, and you'll see why that's helpful. You also need to have a long skinny pin or a needle. Here I'm using a black entomology pin. I don't do entomology, but these pins are useful for something like woven picot because they're really long and skinny. So we'll just put that aside for a moment while we mark where the woven picot is going to be. Now, woven picots have an odd number of legs, and the basic woven picot, like this one, has 3 legs. So I'll mark the tips of these outside legs, and then I'll also mark the point. So it's going to be a long skinny triangle. Woven picots usually have either 3 or 5 legs. They have to have an odd number of legs, and you'll see why that's important. So now I've marked my woven picot. I have my needle threaded, and then I have to stabilize the woven picot with this long skinny pin. So I'll place it in at the top point, and then I'll come back out between those 2 dots. Now I like to bring my pin out a little bit below those 2 dots and right in between them. Now you could also use a milliner's needle for this step, but if you use a milliner's needle, you run the risk of having your needle come out in the middle of a stitch. And ask me how I know that. So here I'm using a nice sharp, a nice long skinny pin. Now I'm going to come up, and I usually like to begin on the left side, but you could begin on either side. So I'll bring my needle and thread up. I'll go around that pin and then stab back in at that dot. So those are my 2 outside legs. Now I'm going to come up right in the middle. Of course, you have to push the pin to one side so you can bring your needle up. Now this will be the 3rd leg. Now most books will tell you just to go around that pin and then start your weaving. But here is a trick I learned from Jacqueline Enthoven's book, and this will really help you get a nice sharp point. So instead of just going around the pin, use your needle to go through that thread at the top. Now this is really the tricky part, but it's really worth it if you want to get a nice clean point. See, that time it didn't quite go through. So I'll try one more time to stab that needle through the thread. Okay, that time it went through. You just need to catch it a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to start the weaving. And to do that, I'm going to switch to the tapestry needle because the tapestry point will not catch. It has a blunt point, so it won't catch on the threads as I'm doing the weaving. Okay, so it's come around the point, it's come around the pin. Now you really have to work at the point at this stage because once you start your weaving and you've gotten down a couple of steps, you can't go back and redo the point. So this is the time to do it. So now I'm going to start here and I'm going to weave my needle under, over, under. And then I'll kind of snug it up, because as I said, this is the time to think about having a nice, clean, sharp point. Now for the other direction, I will just go over, under, over. And then each time I weave through, I'll use my needle to push up against that thread. I'll bring that through. Now notice that I am working from hand to hand. It will really make your life easier if you can stitch with both hands. I'm right-handed, but I can also work with my left hand. So I'll go back and forth, and each time I'll push those threads up so that I'll have a nice point. If you cannot work from hand to hand, or if you're not working on a stationary frame, you could also just turn your hoop or your fabric so that you don't have to work hand to hand. You can just do everything with your dominant hand. So I'm going to go back and forth until I reach the bottom. Now here's a Woven Picot where I have gone all the way to the bottom, and I usually like to end my Woven Picots on the right side, but you can end on either side. So here I've come up, I've gone under that last leg on the right, and then I'll just sink my needle down and fasten off on the back. Now this is always the moment of truth when you find out if you have a nice sharp point to your Woven Picot. You remove the pin, and here I think that I have a nice sharp point to my Woven Picot. So here are some other Woven Picots that I've done. This one, as you can see, is a long, skinny one. Here I have done a Woven Picot with variegated thread, so that makes a nice effect. And you can see that the picots are only attached at the bottom. Although if you're working on wool, you'll find that your needle will usually catch on the wool, so you may have to work at it to get it completely detached, or you can just leave it like that. If you want your Woven Picot to be wider, you could make a 5-leg Woven Picot. And to do that, you do the outside legs first, then you come through here and do the inside legs, then you go back up to do your middle leg, and for this one you're going to bring your needle through both of those legs so that you'll have a nice point. And then your Woven Picot, you'll just go over, under, over, under, over, under, and then just weave back and forth going over and under. So that's how to make Woven Picots.